In a vibrant urban sprawl, a black nurse, freshly released from a 3-year sentence for a wrong he never committed, having aided an elderly man lost to memory, steps back into a world that offers little but the chance to rebuild. He finds work on a highway construction crew, where he heroically saves a young girl from a collapsing scaffold, injuring himself in the process, unnoticed by those around him. Unbeknownst to him, the girl is the governor's daughter. This single act of bravery will unearth a hidden truth from years past and pave the way for a fresh start that could transform his life. Before we delve into this compelling tale, share where you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear your reflections. Dawn was just breaking when the rusted gate creaked open, and Isaiah Carter, 34, stepped out. His tall frame seemed slightly bowed, as if the burden of the past 3 years pressed against his spine. His deep ebony skin had paled faintly under the prison's harsh lights, and his once sharp jawline was now softened by a patchy beard that spoke more of hardship than choice. He carried little, a worn duffel bag slung across his shoulder, scuffed boots dragging on the pavement, and the quiet weight of 3 years locked away for doing what he knew was just. No guard offered farewell. No one did. Beyond the gate, the city was already alive with morning's pulse, cars whirring, shop gates rattling up, people clutching steaming mugs and staring at screens. But when their eyes landed on Isaiah, their pace slowed. A father tugged his son closer, his jaw tightening, as if danger had grazed him. An old woman glanced at Isaiah's face, then hurriedly averted her gaze, whispering as she shuffled across the street. Isaiah kept moving, his shoulders slightly rounded, not from guilt, but from the knowledge that, to some, he'd always be an ex-con before a man. His destination was close, a cramped apartment on the city's fringe, abandoned like the man now returning to it. The key jammed in the lock, reluctant, as if it too questioned his return. Inside, the air was thick with dust, motes drifting in the dawn's glow like forgotten spirits. Cobwebs draped over shelves, between table legs, and across a faded photo of his grandparents above the fireplace, their smiles frozen in sepia, untouched by the ordeal their grandson had faced. Isaiah didn't speak as he entered, no sigh, no curse, no cinematic collapse. He set his bag on a kitchen table, untouched by meals for years, and surveyed the space, searching for traces of the man he once was. He pulled a chair out, sat, elbows on knees, head in hands. His palms still bore the rough scars of prison labor, skin toughened not just by work but by time. By every morning he woke reminding himself why he'd chosen the harder, truer path. Outside, the city hummed, buses groaned, horns honked. A stray cat yowled in the alley. But in Isaiah's apartment, time was suspended. His mind drifted back to the night that upended everything, the night that turned a skilled nurse with a bright future into a prisoner with a number sewn into his jumpsuit. The night an elderly man, eyes clouded with confusion, staggered into the clinic where Isaiah worked, whispering his name like it was a lifeline. He knew the man, Mr. Harold Jenkins, 81, a widower from 3 streets over, a regular patient whose dementia prescriptions were as familiar as his quiet gratitude. But that night he was different. Now, in the stillness of his apartment, Isaiah let the memory rush in, Harold's frantic face, his words tripping over one another, his gaze darting as if the world was a stranger. Isaiah saw the signs immediately: missed medication. He knew the risks: confusion, agitation, the danger of wandering into harm's way. The clinic was locking up, security systems already powering down. But Isaiah stayed. Harold slumped into a chair, gasping, muttering about a wife long gone and a dog he'd never owned. Isaiah stood rooted, torn. The medication was secured, accessible only with a supervisor's code. And his supervisor wasn't answering. No prescription, no approval. But a man was unraveling before him, and Isaiah had to decide, rules or compassion. He chose compassion. He used an override code he wasn't meant to know, retrieved a small dose of Harold's usual medication, and gave it to him with a glass of water. He stayed through the night, watching as Harold's eyes steadied, just enough to know him again. Isaiah didn't leave, didn't even dim the lights. He sat vigil in the clinic's corner, guarding Harold like a silent protector. When dawn broke, his supervisor arrived, saw the open cabinet, saw Isaiah, then Harold still dozing. She didn't ask for explanations. She didn't want them. She called the authorities. Isaiah tried to clarify, but there was no proof, no prescription, no working cameras in that wing, under repair. Harold, disoriented again by morning, couldn't confirm or deny. His supervisor's word held sway. Isaiah's race, though unspoken, tipped the scales further. In court he stood no chance. Now back in his untouched home, Isaiah shut his eyes. He hadn't wept, not once, but a heaviness sat in his chest. Not of guilt, but of disillusionment, with others, with the system, and, in his quietest moments, with himself, for not foreseeing the cost of doing right. As morning light crept across the worn floor, Isaiah sat, no longer caged but not yet free. The days after his return weren't filled with triumph or relief, but with a gnawing loneliness that seeped into his apartment's walls like damp rot. Each morning greeted him with the same peeling ceiling, the same chipped sink, the same silence that clung like a shadow. No job offers waited, no old colleagues stopped by. The world had moved on while he was gone, too fast for him to catch up. He tried, wearing his best shirt. Shoes shined to a faint gleam. Isaiah visited offices, hospitals, and work sites with a resume that once carried weight, only to face tight smiles, averted eyes, or the inevitable, "We'll be in touch." They never were. The box on every form, "Have you been convicted of a felony?" was a wall no explanation could breach. Weeks of rejection piled up, alongside bills and unopened notices from parole officers. Then a call came from the only person who hadn't looked away. Darius, a high school friend now, overseeing a highway construction project. Darius didn't pry, didn't linger on the past. "We need a hand," he said. "It's tough work, but it's work. Show up tomorrow if you're in." Isaiah, weary of waiting for trust, didn't hesitate. Before sunrise, he crossed the city to the highway's edge, where a half-built overpass stretched like a fragile vow. The labor was grueling, hauling concrete bags, dragging steel beams under a relentless sun. Yet there was solace in the rhythm, in the sweat and strain, in the unspoken bond with workers who judged only your effort. Isaiah didn't complain. He arrived early, stayed late, and took no extra breaks. He kept to himself, but worked as if each task could mend a piece of his broken past. On the fifth day, as the crew moved fresh supplies, a group of schoolchildren arrived, wide-eyed and buzzing with excitement, barely managed by an overwhelmed teacher. Isaiah noticed a girl with braided hair and a bright pink backpack, gazing awestruck at the cranes. She pointed, giggling as a digger's arm swung toward a concrete beam. The teacher, caught up with a phone call and a scraped elbow, missed what came next. A faint groan sounded, a shift only a keen eye would catch. Isaiah's head snapped up, spotting a loose scaffold plank tilting free from a poorly secured load, plummeting toward the girl, now standing alone beneath the machinery's shadow. He didn't pause. Dropping his tools, he sprinted across the gravel, vaulting over a pipe. The site's clamor faded, no engines, no shouts, just his pulse thundering. He reached her as the plank fell, yanking her by the arm and shielding her with his body. The impact hit his back and neck, dropping him to one knee, blood seeping through his jacket. But the girl was unharmed, shaken but safe. No one cheered. Most didn't see. The teacher only noticed when the girl ran back, dusty and teary. Isaiah, grimacing, limped to the first aid station, bandaging his neck with unsteady hands. It wasn't his first wound, but it was the first he'd patched. Alone, under the hum of a machine that nearly stole a child's life. He didn't report the incident or the equipment failure. That evening, as the crew left, Isaiah stayed, stacking leftover beams with deliberate care, as if the task could quiet the pain in his skull. But the next morning, something shifted. As dawn painted the sky and Isaiah laced his work boots, a polished SUV rolled up. A woman in a sharp blazer stepped out, holding the hand of the braided-haired girl from the day before. The child pointed at Isaiah, her face alight. The woman approached, her expression calm but searching. "Are you Isaiah Carter?" she asked. Isaiah stood, wiping dust from his hands, and nodded. "I'm Evelyn Harper," she said, offering a handshake. I'm the governor of this state. That girl you saved, she's my daughter." In that moment, under the rising sun and the skeletal frame of an overpass, still reaching for completion, Isaiah blinked. He'd saved a child, acted without thought, and this time someone had noticed. Isaiah hadn't expected thanks, not even recognition. When Evelyn Harper extended her hand, steady and purposeful, he hesitated, not out of distrust, but because kindness now felt unfamiliar, almost jarring. Still, he shook it, his grip firm despite the ache in his back. The girl, clutching a colorful sketch, pointed to a stick figure with deep brown skin and a red streak on its neck. "That's you," she said shyly. "You kept me safe." Her words, simple and unguarded, hit Isaiah harder than any speech could. He smiled, not from pride, but from a quiet warmth that briefly eased years of cold. Evelyn waited until her daughter skipped toward the fence to watch the cranes, then turned to Isaiah with a look of genuine interest, no ulterior motive. "I asked about you," she said, her tone even. "You've been back a month, but your crew chief says you work harder than anyone. Show up first, leave last. Why do you keep so quiet?" Isaiah shrugged, brushing off the praise like dirt from his sleeve. "Just trying to keep moving," he said, voice steady but soft. Evelyn pressed on. "I looked into your case. The conviction. 3 years for dispensing medication without authorization. No priors, no violence. A nurse with a solid career before it all fell apart. That doesn't sit right with me." Isaiah exhaled, gazing at the overpass's steel arc stretching across the divide, linking a city still learning to connect. "It was a mistake," he said, not as an excuse but as an opening. Not mine, but how it was judged. "There was an old man, Mr. Jenkins. He came in one night, lost to his dementia, terrified. He'd missed his meds. No one answered the emergency line. He was fading fast. I made a call, gave him what he needed." He paused, letting the words settle like dust in the light. "I stayed with him all night. Next morning, my supervisor saw the open cabinet, saw me, and called the police. No questions, no working cameras. No one recalled the truth except that I was there, alone, with a controlled drug and no permission." Evelyn listened, her gaze steady, then glanced at her daughter, now chasing a butterfly, before turning back to Isaiah with a look that held purpose. "Why didn't you push back?" "Go to the press?" Isaiah gave a faint, rueful chuckle. "Because I knew how it'd look. A black man alone in a clinic with a missing dose. They didn't need a story, just a villain. And I didn't want to drag Mr. Jenkins through a mess he couldn't grasp. He looked at me like family that night. That was enough." Evelyn nodded, her lips pressed tight, then said softly, "Maybe it was enough then, but it's not now." That night Isaiah lay awake, the ceiling fan's hum unable to quiet his racing thoughts. He'd stopped believing in second chances long ago, but 2 days later a letter arrived, no sender listed. Inside, a note from Evelyn Harper requesting a meeting with the state's Judicial Review Panel, and a grainy photo from a street camera near the clinic, dated that fateful night. It showed Isaiah guiding an elderly man inside, one arm steadying him, the other shielding him from the dark. Events moved swiftly. An investigation reopened, old evidence re-examined. Former colleagues were questioned, including a night guard who recalled Isaiah staying late. Mr. Jenkins' son submitted a statement, noting his father had come home calm that morning, a detail that always puzzled him. Within a month, the conviction was overturned, charges cleared, and Isaiah's nursing license restored. But Evelyn wasn't done. At the overpass's opening ceremony, attended by workers, officials, and press, she took the stage, her daughter by her side, and shared the story. She didn't point fingers or grandstand. She simply spoke of a man who chose to save a life, paid with 3 years of his own, and asked for nothing. Then, as the crowd hushed, she gestured to a screen. A silent video played. Isaiah, bloodied and dusty, carrying a girl from danger, his arms steady despite the pain. No music, no voiceover, just a man doing right. When it ended, Evelyn said, "We build bridges with more than steel. We build them with courage. Let this man's life show us that goodness often goes unseen, and justice sometimes takes the long road home." Isaiah stood at the crowd's edge, hat low, hands in pockets. The applause wasn't loud but steady. respectful, not for a hero or a cause, but for a man who'd done right twice and at last was seen. In the weeks that followed, Isaiah Carter walked through a world that felt subtly altered. The city didn't suddenly embrace him, but the shift was there, a nod instead of a turned head, a free coffee with a quiet, "Thank you," a seat offered on a crowded train without suspicion. People didn't rush to praise him, but they no longer crossed the street to avoid him. And that was its own kind of victory. The story spread, first locally, then statewide, then beyond. Headlines flashed. Wrongfully convicted nurse saves governor's daughter. A hero's redemption. The buzz faded quickly, but its impact lingered. Schools asked him to speak. Activists cited his story in talks of justice. Letters poured in from former inmates, young black men who felt unseen, and elderly men who said they'd known Mr. Jenkins and prayed for Isaiah weekly. Isaiah didn't chase fame. He returned to the life he'd lost: white scrubs, orderly shelves, the calm of a clinic. The hospital, now under new leadership and eager to right past wrongs, rehired him with a raise and a public apology. He took the job, not for pride, but because it was home. On his first day he arrived early, cleaned the counter himself, and unlocked the storage room with steady hands. Everything was the same, yet wholly new. One evening, a month later, the clinic door jingled, and in shuffled a frail figure, Mr. Harold Jenkins. Older, slower, but unmistakable, guided by his son. Harold's eyes, dimmed by time, scanned the room until they met Isaiah's behind the counter. A spark flickered, recognition perhaps, or just the comfort of a known face. He smiled faintly. His son leaned in, whispering, "He wanted to see you." I told him your story, and I think he knew. Isaiah reached across the counter, clasping Harold's trembling hand, and for the first time in years, the world felt right, not because he'd reclaimed what was lost, but because someone remembered the truth. Later that week, Evelyn Harper visited, casual in a sweater and cap, just another citizen. She asked if Isaiah might help shape a community health initiative for ethical decision-making in emergencies, for nurses and paramedics. "We need your perspective," she said. Isaiah agreed, not for glory, but because he knew the weight of impossible choices and the value of choosing kindness, whatever the cost. The truest moment, though, came unexpectedly on a quiet Sunday morning. As Isaiah restocked supplies, he heard small footsteps. Turning, he saw the governor's daughter, Mia, clutching a lunchbox and a new drawing. She set the box on the counter. "Mom made too much," she said, grinning. "Want to share?" Isaiah's smile spread, warm and full, reaching his weary eyes. "I'd like that," he said. They sat outside the clinic on a bench, eating sandwiches, chatting about school, unicorns, and why cranes beat bulldozers. In that moment, under a clear sky with the city's hum in the distance, Isaiah Carter wasn't an ex-convict, a headline or a symbol. He was just Isaiah, a man who'd loved quietly, endured deeply, and chosen, time and again, to believe in the goodness of others. Because in the end, it wasn't the cleared name or the restored life that mattered most. It was the quiet, unyielding light of a man who refused to let hardship dim him, a man who, through steady hands, a patient heart, and a goodness that sought no reward, helped the world see a little more clearly. Join us to share stories that matter by clicking like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the notification bell for daily doses of inspiration and compassion.